Welcome to Slaying Excel Dragons video number 35. Hey, these are the videos that accompany this book, and we are still in chapter 5. We're going to talk about array formulas and functions, pages 320 to 339. And we're going to cover the topics, what is an array formula? We're going to look at the keyboard shortcut to actually enter array formulas, Ctrl-Shift-Enter. We'll see how array formulas can save spreadsheet space, meaning you can make more compact solutions. We'll see that sometimes the only efficient option is to switch over to an array formula. We'll see a formula for counting unique items, and we'll talk about functions, the frequency and transpose functions, which are array functions. Now let's go over to our workbook. We're in the excelisstart file. You can download that from the link below the video or get it from the DVD. We're going to start on the Array 1 sheet. Now, this video's all about array formulas. And first off, what is an array? Array can be a couple things. And we've already seen this in a few videos. If you go back to the SUMPRODUCT video, we did a bunch of array formulas that were all inside the SUMPRODUCT function. But an array, the word array just means a range of values or items, either in the cells or created inside the formula. So the word array just means more than one item. Now, when we create formulas, we usually make formulas like this. I'm going to hit F2. Oh, yeah, single cell reference, some operation, another single cell reference. So this is a regular type of formula. Anytime you're doing operations, and it could be minus, multiplying, equal sign, comparative operators, whatever. Cell reference, regular formula. A range of cells or an array compared to some other cell or range or array, that's an array formula. So it's when we're doing operations on arrays. Now I want to go back and remind ourselves, because we've already done a bunch of these. I'm going to scroll over and find the SUMPRODUCT sheet. Now here's the SUMPRODUCT in the SP2. I'm going to click on SP2. Now technically, when we do COUNTIFs, this is not considered an array formula, but were we doing operations on arrays? You betcha. What were we doing? This example here was counting how many Galts, how many products did Galt, how many sales did Galt have to the customer PCC. So we went through here. Oh, we had to look through an entire range and another entire range. And every time we got a true, let's see, a true for Galt and a true for PCC, that was counted. So technically, we're doing something with ranges of values or arrays. Also, we saw how to do SUMIFs and SUMPRODUCT to not only count, but then from that count, true, true, then get a value over here. So in this case, we're using 3 columns, 3 ranges or arrays. Now, in the sum, you definitely want to go back and watch the SUMPRODUCT video. It's like 40 minutes long, because that was a real introduction to array formulas. In that video, we had some great examples. This is in the sheet SUMPRODUCT, cell D35. I'm going to hit F4. Whoops, not F4, F2. And there it was. Oh, now I remember this formula. We used the year function to match serial dates with a single year. And then we went ahead and told the SUMPRODUCT to do the operations, all the trues and falses there, and then go to the second array argument, boom, and find those and add them. This is an array formula here. Still further in this video, if I go to the top, just to remind ourselves, we saw a bunch of cool. We did a weighted average cost formula, and this is all doing operations on array right there. That's an comparative operator, equal sign. Anytime we have an operator and there's a range in our formula, that is an array formula. And finally, we did a cool one over here where we were counting, and our criteria needed to be a month and a year. And we used the text function. And you can go back and watch this. But there it is right there. This entire text function was delivering an array. Now, this is technically, right here, this is a range of cells, which is an array, right? Because a range of cells can be an array, or is just more than one value. So that range right there is an array. But this whole formula, when we evaluated and hit the F9 key, it delivered an array of values to our formula. All right. So the point of this is simply we've seen a bunch of operations inside of formulas on arrays. All right, let's go back to our sheet. And we're going to see the two main reasons in this video. I'm going to go to the Array 1 sheet. The two main reasons that we do array formulas is, the first one is simply that we want to save spreadsheet real estate. So example, we had to calculate, add an extra column to our data set, calculate gross profit, and then add it. Now what did we do here? I'm going to click in this cell and hit F2. Oh yeah, cell minus cell. Enter F2, cell minus cell. The entire column that we added is simply always taking two corresponding cells from columns here. And then what do? Once we got all the gross profits, we added them. If this extra column is something that you cannot have in your spreadsheet, then you want to switch over to array formulas. And think about this. Since this formula is this cell minus this cell, what if we just took the whole column, which is a range, and subtracted another range? Let's go ahead and see how to do that. Now, ready? Equals, and I'm just going to take this range. Ding, 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 ding. We have a whole range of values, and it's not inside a function like sum, so we're doing array formulas. There's our operator minus this whole other column. Now, right now, this formula would not work, but let's highlight it and hit the F9 key to see that what we're doing is an operation on ranges of values, F9, and it delivers all of the individual values as if, look, 13, 760, 12, 40, exactly the same values, as if we had had that whole column in our spreadsheet. Now, what did we do up here? We had the column, and then we used the sum function, so no problem. Anytime your formula is delivering an array of values, I'm going to Control Z, you can just put it inside sum function. Now, here's the thing. Right now, the sum function is not programmed to handle arrays. In our earlier video, when we looked at SUMPRODUCT, we noticed that the actual argument was called array. And in that case, we just hit Enter. But this sum function cannot handle an array. So watch this. What happens when I hit Enter? Value error. That error is very important when you're doing array formulas. It means you forgot to tell Excel that this is an array formula. So I'm going to hit F2. Now notice, what do we do? So far in this class, we would hit Enter. We could do Control Enter. We could hit Tab. All of these officially put the formula in the cell. When you hit Enter, you're telling Excel, hey, calculate this. But when you have an array formula, you can't hit Enter. There's a special sequence of keystrokes you have to hit. You hold Control and Shift down at the same time, and then hit Enter. That's why sometimes people call these Control Shift Enter formulas. Ready? I'm holding Control Shift and Enter. Oh, that's so cool. Now let me try that again. I am going to tell Excel that this is an array formula. And the way I do that, Control Shift Enter. Now, let's look up in the formula bar here. Wait a second. I click there, and those little curly black brackets went away. I'm going to click Escape. What are those curly brackets? Those curly brackets are Excel telling you that Excel understands this is an array formula. Now, those curly brackets can never be typed in. They just appear when you do Control Shift Enter. So the way it works is you tell Excel it's an array formula with Control Shift Enter, and Excel tells you it understood by putting curly brackets. All right, so that's how you do array formulas. Now, anytime we have a situation where we are adding, which we're doing here, we want to switch over to the SUMPRODUCT function. And that's what we saw in that earlier video. A lot of examples of when we're doing operations on arrays. But this is going to be slightly different. All right, we're going to do SUMPRODUCT. Now, it's going to be slightly different in that in the earlier video, we oftentimes took array times array times array. That's the product part of sum, and then they added them. Here, we just are going to enter a single array. And our array is going to be that range right there. minus this range. Again, we're doing an operation on array, so that's an array formula. And all we're doing is we're plopping this little thing. And if I hit F9, you can see it's just a bunch of values. Those values, we want them to be added. So if you just put a single array inside of SUMPRODUCT, it just adds them. It doesn't do the multiplying. And the advantage to this is we don't have to use Ctrl-Shift-Enter. I hit Enter, and it calculates. Again, the beauty of SUMPRODUCT, there's so many cool things you can do with it. That screen tip argument in bold says array. It can handle arrays. All right, so why do we do this? Because we didn't want to waste spreadsheet real estate. Now, this is a small example, but imagine if you had, thousands of rows. It's just in one single formula. Boom. All right, now let's go over and look on our next sheet, array 2. And whereas the last example, we wanted to save spreadsheet real estate, here, our goal is to calculate the min, max, and mode. But we have a criteria. Here are our values. These are times in minutes to assemble a product. And we have different locations. And we'd like to find the minimum and maximum, but only for Seattle, only for Oakland. Now, there is no min if, max if, mode if. There are functions like average if, sum if, and count if. Again, that if always says, hey, we're going to have some criteria. We're not going to calculate an average for all of them, just some of them. And beautiful, average if. It calculates, it looks through this whole range, finds all the Seattles. Every time it sees Seattle, it says true. It goes over, it gets the number. And then it uses those to calculate the average. And then you just copy it down. Beautiful. Seattle, Oakland, SF. Well, no problem. There is no min if, but we can do this. Equals min, and then we put an if. Now, again, there just is no other way to do this type of calculation except if you do this array formula that we're about to do. So, logical test. Well, so far, when we did if function, it was always, is this single cell greater than or equal to the hurdle or some comparative operator like that. But now we're just going to highlight the whole column. Control-Shift down arrow, F4. Now notice this logical test, it's used to only getting a single logical test that delivers a single true or false. Now we slapped a whole range in here. We're going to do our comparative operator. Is that equal to 2 cells to our left, Seattle? Now, if I highlight this and hit F9, a lot of trues and falses. So we've just jumped into the realm of array formulas. That logical test argument is expecting a single true or false. We give it a bunch of trues and falses. So this makes this an array formula. And we're going to have to use the keystrokes Control-Shift-Enter. Now, comma, what's the value if true? We're going to put all of these values in. And then F4 to lock it. So again, we're slapping a bunch of things in there. All of our if examples earlier in this class, we were always putting one thing, a single word or a single number. Now, the value if false, we don't need it. If you leave it out, the if function will put a false in for every time it sees a non-matching criteria. So we can leave that out. Let's just highlight this and see what in the world we get. And F9. Oh, look at that. Isn't that cool? So we get a bunch of falses and some numbers. And all of the numbers here are exactly the ones that correspond to Seattle. Control-Z. And lucky for us, the min function will just flat out ignore all the falses. Now, we need to tell Excel that this is an array formula. And the way we do that is we hold Control-Shift and Enter. Calculating. Up here we can see Excel's telling us, yes, it understood that this was entered as an array formula. Now I'm going to increase the decimals, I think, and then double click and send this down. Click in the last cell. Notice the curly brackets, but when I put it into edit mode, you're never going to see those. Those only appear. I'm going to click Escape while it's sitting in the cell. So when people look at it, they can say, oh, yeah, that's an array formula. All right, so we could do the same thing for max. And oftentimes, these are called aggregate functions where you have a bunch of numbers and you're doing a calculation. anytime you have a function like this and you need criteria, just make your own if. There may be a SUMIF, COUNTIF, and average if. But for us, we can make up our own if functions now. So what is it? Max if any of those, Control Shift down arrow to highlight, F4 to lock. Anytime those are equal to Seattle, then that's the logical test, a bunch of trues and falses. Then what do we want? The whole column of numbers. Control Shift down arrow, F4. The final argument in if, we don't need it. Close parentheses on the max, Control Shift Enter. That's us telling Excel this is an array formula. Double click and send it down. Finally, we could do mode. Mode is the one that occurred most frequently. Ooh, that's the mod. I'm going to use my compatibility function. If any of these, Control Shift down arrow, F4, are equal to Seattle, then what do we want? Control Shift down arrow, F4. Absolutely awesome. We have the power to create our own types of functions, in essence, using our knowledge of array formulas. Control Shift Enter, double click and send it down. All right, let's look at one or two other formulas. Let's look at one other formula, an array formula, and then we're going to look at array functions. There's actually some specific array functions we want to take a look at. Here's an interesting situation. We have a list of names, and we want to count, just a count for a unique count. So we can see there's 2 Sues. So really what we would like to do is get the count of 1, even though there's 2 names here. We know that we could use something like count to count non-empty cells, which is great for counting words. But that's going to count all of them. We can clearly see here there are 2 Sues, so what we really want is 5. I'm going to come up here, and we're going to look at the COUNTIF function. Now, earlier, we talked about, in the SUMPRODUCT video, we talked about the SUMIF and how it cannot handle arrays. Now, as long as it's not an array created inside the formula, that's OK. See how it says range there? It'll handle ranges of values from cells, but it cannot handle an array where you actually create the array inside the formula. So I'm going to put a range here. I wish they had just programmed it way back and it says array, and then it can handle arrays. OK, so right now, what would you do? You type a comma and get to criteria, and you type something like Tom. And then it would count how many Toms there are. I'm going to enter that, 1. But what would happen if we put the whole range in? Now, that argument is not expecting anything but a single value. We're putting a bunch of values. So now, all of a sudden, we've jumped into the realm of array formulas. Let's just highlight this and hit the F9 key and evaluate it. It says 1, 2, 1, 2, 0. Oops, that's 0. We don't want that 0. And a 1 and a 1. Well, oh, I see what it did. In essence, we gave it a criteria of everything, right? All of the values right there. And it gave me for Tom, oh, there's 1. But notice for the Sue, what did it do? There's a 2 there and a 2 there. Huh. Now, how could we convert this into a unique count? Well, what if we divided all of this by took 1 and divided all these as the denominator for the numerator 1. I didn't say that very well. Here's what I mean to say. Control Z. What if I took this array there and did 1 divided by? What would we get now? Well, what's 1 divided by 1? 1. So every time it encounters a value that is only in the list once, it's going to get 1 divided by 1. Let's hit the F9. But look what it does. For Sue, anytime there are repeats, it takes 1 divided by 2, which is 0.5, and 1 divided by 2, which is 0.5. And what happens if you add all these? What's 0.5 plus 0.5? It's 1. So this is a very clever way of getting enough numbers that you could add them that would equal a unique count. I'm going to Control Z. Actually, F9. You could see there's a problem right there. Divide by 0, Control Z. So I'm going to do a little trick here. This range right here of values, right now if I hit F9, see how they are text, but that 0 is not text. It's an actual 0 because an empty cell is being treated as zeros. Well, Control Z, we could ampersand join nothing to this. Ampersand and then double quote. That means we're adding a blank. This is a clever way of converting all the entries to text. So now there'll no longer be a 0 there. There'll be a blank. Let's highlight this and hit the F9 key. And sure enough, there it is. Now, Control Z. What's going to happen if I highlight this whole thing and hit F9? Well, now what is it going to do? It's going to take that blank and consider it an item in the list. So we are going to exclude all blanks. Now I'm going to go ahead and put this in a sum product. Now right now, if we didn't have any blanks, that would work. And let me show you that this will work. I'm going to type Sue here. Now I'm going to come up here, and first I'm going to show you that now that there's 3 Sues, this little construction here is going to deliver 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. F9. Whoops. F9. And now you can see it's delivering that 1 for any time it finds an actual unique item, but 0.33, 0.33, 0.33. So all duplicates will have a similar type of pattern. It'll always be 1 divided by the count. 1 divided by 3, 1 divided by 3, 1 divided by 3. All we need to do now is add them up. Control Z. And notice we're going to use our little trick again. Sum product can handle arrays. I only have a single array, so I'm going to hit Enter. Now, what we want to do is if you do have blanks, then we need to do something about that. No problem. Just like we did in the earlier sum product example, we can create an array of trues and falses that say, I am not blank. I am not blank. Oops, blank. So ready? I'm going to type a comma. We're going to leave this one in the second array. The first one here, we're going to come and put double negative. That's going to convert our trues and falses to 1s and 0s. I'm going to open parentheses, highlight, not. The comparative operator not is less than, greater than, and then not blank, double quote. Close parentheses. Right now, I could say anything in that range not blank. I'm going to hit F9. Oh, true. There's one false. That's for that blank right there. Control Z. The double negative is our efficient way of converting trues and falses to 1s and 0s. Hit F9. If you skipped over watching the sum product video, you got to go watch that one. That's like the precursor to this. And that's it. This will work. And in essence, what it'll do, it'll take all of these 1s and 0s, F9. All of these 1s and 0s, F9. And times all of these, F9. Oh, that is so cool. So right there, 0 for I am a blank. 0 times that 1 right there, it'll eliminate it. Escape, and then all you have to do is hit Enter. And that is a cool way of getting a unique count using a cool little array construction. Now let's go over to our next sheet, array 3. We've got to talk about array functions. There's something called a frequency function. And we've actually, so far in this class, talked a bunch about and criteria and between criteria. We saw how to create a count between 2 different categories. But if you don't want to go through all the hassle of creating individual formulas, there's just a straight function called frequency that will do it. There's 2 important things. You got to understand the categories that it uses. And then when we do the formula, I'll tell you the second thing. But here it is. If you tell the frequency function the upper limits, it will automatically take the first one and say, hey, in this count, I'm going to include everything less than this. And notice the upper end is always going to get the equal sign. Now, when it comes down to this next one, now there's a second item in the list, a second upper limit. So the frequency function will know to go between these. It will not include the lower end, but include the upper end. Similar here, include the upper end, not the lower. include the upper, not the lower. The strange thing about the frequency is if we give it 4 upper limits, it'll automatically add 1 extra category because it doesn't want to make any mistakes. Just in case there's some values bigger than the last upper limit you gave it, it'll add this extra category. Now, array formulas do operations on arrays and deliver arrays. We've seen how when we hit our F9, it's delivering a bunch of values. Frequency is no different. But since we actually want the individual elements in the array to be displayed in cells, to do this function, you highlight the range in advance. Normally, we create a formula and copy it down, but not with array functions. Highlight, and in the active cell, you type your function, frequency. All it wants is the data. I'm going to click over here, Control Shift down arrow. And guess what? You do not have to lock these cell references right here. When I Control Shift Enter, it copies it down. It actually simultaneously puts the function into all the cells, but you don't have to lock them. And we'll see that when we put it in edit mode at the end. All right, so data array, you give it the data, and then the bins. Just the upper limits. These upper limits are included as the equal sign and the upper limit, and there's 1 extra category. That's why we are highlighting 1 more cell than there are categories. Control, Shift, and Enter. That's us telling Excel this is an array formula. And there's the curly brackets, and there is our count. Now let's come over here and click in the last cell and hit F2. Notice A2 to A14, same as up here. We did not have to lock them. The fact that we highlighted and Control Shift Enter, they all got entered. Also, an array function or formula entered into multiple cells. If I come here and try to delete this, it's going to say you cannot change part of an array. So if you want to change it, you have to change the whole thing, like deleting it or something. Totally awesome. Great frequency function. Just a great way to count between 2 numbers. Much faster than most other ways. But remember, the upper end gets included in the categories and then that last extra category. All right, we're going to go over to the sheet array for one last array function. What if you have a table like this and you just want to flip it on its side? Now, earlier in the class, we saw how to do this with copy and paste. So I'm going to copy. I'm going to click right here, and I go up to the paste drop down. And there it is, transpose. And boom. But notice that's just copying the table and moving it. What if I actually want them linked? I'm going to clear all this. Clear all, or Alt EAA. What if I wanted it linked? Well, you highlight. We can use the transpose function, but you got to highlight a range down here, and you actually have to count. I count 6 columns, 7 rows. So when I highlight down here, 7 columns, 6 rows. And then no problem. In the active cell, you type your transpose function. Highlight the range. And just like frequency, we are highlighting in advance a bunch of cells. I'm going to Control Shift Enter. I can leave that last parenthesis off. It'll put it in. Control Shift and Enter. Absolutely amazing. Look at the sales rep. They were column headers. Now they're row headers. And we could see up here the curly brackets. One last thing, though. I'd like to add some formatting. So we're going to see how to use paste special, but do 2 paste specials at once. I'm going to copy and then highlight right up in this corner and go up to paste special dialog box. Boop. And I could say transpose. Right now, it would do just what we did before. But now I'm going to say formats. Boom, 2 paste specials at once. Click OK. It slaps the format on, transposed from up here. All right, that's a bunch about array formulas and functions. We'll see you. Actually, the next video, custom number format, we're going to have one last array formula. All right, see you next video.